Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something I think everyone thinks about at some point, how to learn English.
Right.
And we're going to be looking at it through kind of a funny lens,
Okay.
through the lens of a beginner's language learning book.
Interesting.
And you might be thinking, why would I care about that?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes going back to basics can reveal insights that we miss when we're, deep in the weeds of advanced learning. And this book in particular is really cool
Okay.
because it's got all these personal stories from the author's own journey,
Mm.
and it makes it surprisingly relatable.
You know what I find fascinating is how the book really frames those early stages of learning.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that, all of us, even as seasoned language learners, were once beginners,
Right.
grappling with those same fears and uncertainties.
Totally. And one thing that really struck me
Yeah.
was how much they emphasize the power of daily habits. It's not just, practice every day. They really explain why it's so important.
Well, and that's where the concept of neuroplasticity comes in,
Okay.
which is this amazing ability of our brains to rewire themselves.
Right.
So every time you practice, think of it like you're strengthening those pathways in
Yeah.
your brain that are helping you understand and use English.
Okay, that makes sense. But they don't just talk about,
Right.
abstract brain stuff.
Yeah.
They have this great anecdote about the author talking to themselves in English, even if it felt silly at first.
Oh, wow.
Like they would walk around their house and just narrate their every move just to get used to the sounds.
That's brilliant.
Right?
It takes away that pressure of like having to have a perfect conversation.
Yeah.
It allows you to experiment
Right.
freely with the language.
Totally.
It's like a musician practicing scales before playing a concerto.
You know what else they talk about a lot?
What's that?
Embracing mistakes. They're really big on this idea that mistakes aren't failures. They're actually valuable learning opportunities.
And that's such a crucial mindset shift for a lot of learners.
Yes.
You see, we often associate mistakes with shame or embarrassment,
Right.
especially when it comes to language.
Especially.
But if we can reframe them as stepping stones,
Yeah.
as feedback that helps us improve,
Hmm.
then the whole learning process becomes less intimidating.
Yeah, I remember feeling so self-conscious when I first started speaking English.
Sure.
Like I was terrified of saying the wrong thing.
Right.
But the book has this passage where the author calls their mistakes learning treasures.
Oh, I love that.
I know, it totally changes the perspective.
It does. And there's actually science to back that up.
Really?
Studies have shown that when we make mistakes, our brains are more likely to remember the correct information the next time around.
So mistakes are actually good for our brains.
It seems that way.
That's a relief.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to try to see them differently from now on. And you know what else this book is all about?
What's that?
Having fun.
Okay.
They really emphasize finding ways to make the learning process enjoyable.
And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
When we enjoy something, we're more likely to stick with it.
Right.
And from a cognitive perspective, positive emotions can actually enhance our ability to learn and remember new information.
So watching my favorite English TV show is not just a guilty pleasure. It's actually helping me learn.
Exactly.
Awesome.
The book gives tons of examples of how to make learning fun.
Yeah.
Like listening to music,
Right.
watching movies,
Mhm.
playing games,
Yeah.
even reading comics.
They actually tell this story about the author learning new vocabulary from watching a cartoon about a funny dog.
That's great.
It's a great reminder that learning can happen in the most unexpected places.
And what's really important is finding what works best for you.
Yeah.
This book emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning.
Right.
Some people thrive in structured environments. Others prefer more immersive experiences. It's all about discovering what resonates with your own learning style and preferences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most overlooked aspects of language learning is like the power of listening. This book calls it the secret weapon, and I think they're onto something.
It's easy to think of listening as passive,
Yeah.
just letting the sounds wash over you. But
Mm.
this book argues that it's actually a very active process,
Okay.
a way of training your ear
Yeah.
to recognize all those subtle nuances of pronunciation and intonation and rhythm.
They even compare it to building a house.
Okay.
They say trying to speak a language without practicing listening is like trying to build a house without a foundation.
Wow.
You might be able to stack a few bricks, but it's not going to be very stable.
It's such a vivid image,
Right?
and it really highlights how interconnected all those skills are. Good listening skills are the foundation for
Yeah.
good speaking skills and and vice versa.
And the book doesn't just tell you to listen more.
Right.
It gives you like concrete strategies for how to do it effectively.
Okay.
Like, did you know that listening to English songs can actually help you learn?
Absolutely.
Really?
Music has this incredible ability to tap into our emotions
Yeah.
and make learning more enjoyable.
Uh-huh.
Plus, song lyrics are often repetitive, which helps reinforce vocabulary and grammar
Yeah.
in a way that just feels effortless.
I remember when I first started learning English, I would listen to the Beatles
Oh, nice.
and try to sing along, even if I didn't understand all the words.
Sure.
It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I think it really helped me to internalize the rhythm and flow of the language.
Yeah. The book also suggests watching TV shows and movies,
Okay.
especially with subtitles.
Right.
That way you can connect the spoken word with its written form,
Right.
which is especially helpful for visual learners.
And they don't shy away from the more challenging stuff either.
Okay.
They even recommend listening to the news in English,
Wow.
even if it feels overwhelming at first.
Well, news broadcasts often use clear standard pronunciation.
Yeah.
And that structured format can be really helpful for training your ear to pick out key information.
Okay.
It's like a workout
Yeah.
for your listening muscles.
And, of course, we can't forget about podcasts. The book encourages listeners to explore podcasts on any topic that interests them.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
When we're genuinely interested in something,
Uh-huh.
we're more likely to be engaged
Right.
and pay attention,
Totally.
which makes the learning process so much more effective.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between forcing yourself to eat broccoli
Yeah.
and savoring a delicious meal.
And they have some really practical tips for active listening, too.
Like what?
Things like taking notes,
Okay.
writing down new words or phrases,
Mhm.
and even trying to summarize what you've heard.
Wow.
It's all about making sure you're not just passively absorbing the sounds, but actively processing the information.
They even suggest listening to the same material multiple times.
Okay.
Or using audio with transcripts.
Yeah.
Repetition is key for solidifying learning. And having that transcript handy allows you to kind of check your comprehension and focus on specific areas
Right.
where you might be struggling.
It's like having a language detective toolkit.
Right.
You can break down the language, analyze it, and really get to grips with how it works.
But the book also acknowledges that, listening can be frustrating.
Sure.
Especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
There will be times when you feel lost or overwhelmed.
They have this great line, if you listen to English every day, you will improve.
Yes.
Slowly but surely.
It's a reminder that language acquisition is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
Consistency and patience are key.
Totally.
The more you immerse yourself in the language, the more your brain will adapt
Okay.
and start making sense of those patterns.
Right. And even if you don't understand every single word, your brain is still working in the background,
Exactly.
making connections and building that linguistic foundation.
That's right.
So we've covered a lot of ground on listening, but this book has so much more to offer.
Yeah.
They dedicate entire chapters to each of the core skills:
Okay.
listening, speaking, reading, and writing.
And in the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we're going to tackle one that often fills learners with dread.
Oh!
Speaking,
Okay.
we'll explore the book's tips for overcoming that fear
Yeah.
and communicating with confidence.
All right. So we're back, and, we've explored those daily habits. We talked about embracing mistakes, but now we're at the part that I think a lot of English learners find the most daunting: speaking.
Yeah, it's understandable why speaking can feel so intimidating.
Right.
You're putting yourself out there, you're making yourself vulnerable to judgment.
Totally.
But this book really points out that's where the real magic happens.
Right. There's a real sense of accomplishment when you can finally use the language to connect with others.
Right.
But how do you get over that initial hump? That fear of sounding silly or making mistakes?
Well, the book offers some really practical advice.
Okay.
One of my favorites is this idea that you don't have to wait until you feel ready
Okay.
to start speaking.
Interesting.
In fact, they argue that the best way to improve is to just dive in and start talking, even if it feels messy at first.
They even encourage you to embrace those messy moments, to see them as stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Exactly.
There's this great analogy in the book about a child learning to walk.
Oh, yeah.
They stumble, they fall, but they keep getting back up.
Right.
Each stumble is a learning experience, a chance to adjust and improve.
The book also emphasizes the importance of creating a safe and supportive environment for speaking practice.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, this could be finding a language partner,
Okay.
joining a conversation group,
Uh-huh.
or even just talking to yourself out loud.
Wait, talking to yourself, I thought that was a sign you're going crazy.
Not at all.
Okay.
The book actually has this funny anecdote about the author practicing different scenarios in front of the mirror,
Really?
like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions.
Hmm.
It might sound silly, but it allows you to experiment with different phrases and build confidence in a low-pressure setting.
Okay. I can see the value in that. And, one of the biggest hurdles for me personally has always been worrying about my accent.
Sure.
I feel like it holds me back from speaking freely.
The book addresses this directly, reminding us that everyone has an accent,
Right.
and that's perfectly okay.
Okay.
The most important thing is to communicate clearly and effectively.
Right.
They encourage learners to focus on speaking slowly and clearly, rather than trying to mimic a native speaker's accent.
Okay, so it's more about getting the message across than sounding perfect.
Absolutely.
Got it.
And they have this fantastic line that really resonated with me.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to let your personality shine through.
Hmm.
They emphasize that your unique voice and perspective are valuable assets, and that you don't have to erase them to speak English well.
I love that. It's a reminder that language is ultimately about connection
Yeah.
and expressing who you are.
And that's what makes this book so special.
Yeah.
It breaks down those barriers and makes this journey of speaking English feel accessible and even enjoyable.
I came into this deep dive thinking we'd just be skimming the surface of a beginner's book, but I've actually learned so much.
Me too.
It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest advice can be the most profound.
I agree. And even though we've reached the end of our exploration of this book,
Right.
the real journey is just beginning for you, the listener.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. What small step can you take today to make your English speaking practice more enjoyable and effective?
Maybe it's trying out one of the techniques we discussed, or finding a language partner, or simply giving yourself permission to make mistakes
Right.
and have fun with the process.
Remember, every conversation is a chance to learn, to grow, and to connect. Embrace those opportunities and watch your confidence soar.
That's right.
Well, that's a wrap on another deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of language and learning. Until then, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep the passion for English alive.